Have you ever noticed there are men who never need to argue, never need to raise their voice, never need to explain themselves, and yet the whole room still bends around them? They don't chase validation. They don't beg to be understood. They don't fight to be seen. They simply withdraw. They go quiet. They remove their presence, and when they do, something unsettling happens. The air changes. The room feels colder. People get restless. Their minds start reaching for an answer that never comes. That isn't passivity. That's calculated power. Machiavelli understood this. To him, withdrawal wasn't retreat. It was dominance through absence. He would say, "A prince must know how to disappear without losing his influence." Because when absence is intentional, it becomes a mirror. In that mirror, people don't just see you. They see themselves. They see their dependency, their entitlement, their discomfort with no longer having access to what they took for granted. They don't really miss you. They miss their ability to summon you. They don't fear losing your love. They fear losing their grip on you. And if you've been the man who always shows up, who answers every time, who replies even when it drains you, who explains just to keep the peace, then understand this: you haven't been loved. You've been used. Machiavelli would tell you that predictability is not virtue. Predictability is liability. The man who is always available can never be truly feared, and the man who is never feared is always, on some level, controlled. You think your kindness is building connection, but kindness without boundaries doesn't create respect. It creates contempt. You become background noise, an emotional butler on call, a free therapist, a crisis manager, a permanent shoulder to cry on for people who would never show up for you the same way. Every time you say yes when you should have stayed silent, you're not keeping the peace. You're selling your dignity for a brief feeling of being needed. Machiavelli would call that weakness disguised as virtue. He'd tell you, never let your value be measured by how quickly you respond or how willing you are to please. Because when you are always there, you lose leverage. You lose mystery. You lose scarcity. And scarcity is the foundation of influence. Scarcity is what makes gold valuable. Scarcity is what makes a king's presence heavy when he finally enters the room. So the next time you feel the urge to over-explain yourself, to prove your good intentions, to reassure people who have never once reassured you, don't. Withdraw instead. Not as revenge, not as some petty game, but as a strategy of refinement. You disappear to reintroduce yourself. You step back not to punish them, but to reshape you. From a man who serves everyone's emotions into a man who is sovereign over his own. You stop being their emotional servant and start becoming a force they no longer feel entitled to. Withdrawal is not cowardice. It's evolution. It's the moment you stop reacting and start positioning. The moment you stop being predictable and become unreadable. The moment you move from being always reachable to strategically unreachable and eventually emotionally untouchable. And that is when the world starts to pay attention. Because when you suddenly stop explaining, stop showing up, stop responding on command, people don't just wonder where you went. They wonder what changed inside you. What power did you discover? What line did they cross that you never bothered to announce? If any of this hits something raw in you, don't ignore it. Take a second and write this in the comments of your own mind, or under this kind of message if you're watching it somewhere public. I disappear to reclaim my power. Let that sentence become a switch in your head, a private order, a reminder that you are no longer available on demand. And if you're ready to walk deeper into this kind of silent strategy, not to chase noise, but to rise above it, then stay with me. Because what we're talking about here isn't just being distant or acting cold. This is about learning how to survive in a world ruled by perception. You were told that being useful is power, that being agreeable is virtue, that being available is love. But the truth is brutal. Being useful is not power. Being predictable is not loyalty. Being always available is the slow death of respect. From the moment you were a child, you were trained to be agreeable. Say yes. Don't make waves. Reply quickly. Apologize even when you're not wrong. Smile even when you're uncomfortable. Explain yourself so no one feels offended. Machiavelli would smirk at that conditioning. He didn't believe in moral submission. He believed in power management. If you are always accessible, always explaining, always smoothing things over, you've already abandoned the throne of your own life. Because the man who makes himself cheap will never be treated as rare. You think your instant replies show commitment. You think your constant availability builds closeness. But what it really builds is expectation. And expectation always kills appreciation. They stop appreciating your effort and start assuming your presence. Machiavelli saw through this. He'd say, "The man who tries to be loved by everyone becomes a slave to the ungrateful. People don't respect the man who always says yes. They exploit him." Here's how it plays out. They send a message. You answer within seconds. They complain. You over-explain. They stir chaos. You calm them down. They dump their emotional storms on you. You absorb them and say, "It's okay, I understand." You slowly become their crisis manager, their validation machine, their shield against discomfort. But ask yourself, who does that for you? Who carries your storms? You weren't born to be a human buffer for broken people. You were born to rule your own inner kingdom. Machiavelli wouldn't comfort you in this state, he'd awaken you. He'd say, when they expect you, disappear. When they depend on you, detach. When they assume you're theirs, remind them you belong to no one. Because the man who can't break expectations will forever be ruled by them. You think explaining yourself makes you noble. But to manipulators, your explanations are confessions. Your transparency becomes their weapon. Your kindness without boundaries turns into a leash. So what should you do? Break the rhythm. Interrupt the pattern. Withdraw without warning. Let them wonder what changed. Let them feel the emptiness they swore they'd never notice. Let their comfort with your presence collapse under the weight of your absence. That is how you regain control. By replacing predictability with tactical silence. You answer only when it serves you. You remember that your time, energy, and attention are not obligations, they're privileges. They're rewards that must be earned, not rights to be demanded. The next time someone pressures you to respond, pause. Ask yourself, does this person deserve a piece of my inner world? Or are they just addicted to the version of me that never says no? If it's not a strong, clear yes, then it's a strategic no. And that's not cruelty, that's clarity. It's not ego, it's sovereignty. If these words sting, let them, because the truth always burns before it cleanses. Let it burn through the parts of you that were trained to be controlled, the parts that confuse peacekeeping with self-betrayal. If you're ready to dismantle that old version of yourself, the one who served without limit, who explained just to be understood, then say it, even just to yourself. My predictability is my enemy. From this moment forward, understand something Machiavelli taught every prince. In every war, the smartest generals don't fight every battle. They don't draw their swords at every provocation. They conserve. They calculate. They wait for the moment that matters. Because their greatest weapon isn't the sword, it's the energy to wield it when the time is right. Bring that same mindset into your life. Every conversation you engage in, every insult you respond to, Every meaningless argument you defend yourself in, all of it costs you energy. And most men don't even realize they're being drained. They wake up exhausted not from work, but from exposure. Exposure to people who drain them, situations that weaken them, habits that slowly leak their power drop by drop until they're left hollow. Machiavelli wouldn't call it burnout. He'd call it strategic failure. Because the man who wastes his power on trivial battles will have nothing left when the real war comes. And make no mistake, there is always a real war coming. Your energy is not infinite. It's currency. And who you give it to is who you obey. Carl Jung said every thought, every emotion draws from a limited reservoir. Machiavelli would go even further. He wouldn't just protect energy. He would weaponize it. Use it like gold, not to give away freely, but to buy leverage. You might think you're noble for showing up for everyone, for replying to every message, for defending yourself in every misunderstanding. But every reaction makes you predictable. Every explanation makes you transparent. Every outburst gives your enemies a map to your mind. Manipulators don't need to overpower you. They just need to make you waste yourself. And you'll do it willingly, thinking you're being kind, thinking you're being good. But you're not being good. You're being drained. You're being controlled. Machiavelli would never allow that. He'd tell you, withdraw your energy from the useless. Let fools destroy themselves in the silence you no longer break. Because the moment you stop giving them what they crave, your attention, your reaction, your validation, you become dangerous. They'll call you cold. They'll call you distant. They'll say you've changed. Good. Let them. Because Machiavelli would smile and tell you, now you're unpredictable, now you're unreadable, and the unreadable man becomes ungovernable. You were never meant to be a public fountain, pouring your energy out to anyone who asks. You were meant to guard your inner fire like a fortress. When your energy becomes sacred, your presence becomes rare, and when your presence becomes rare, it becomes power. So here's your command. Stop defending yourself in pointless arguments. Stop responding to emotional bait. Stop proving your worth to people who never earned your loyalty. Start conserving yourself. Start protecting your energy like it's your last breath. Because the next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Ask yourself, do they want resolution or do they just want control? If the answer is unclear, default to silence. Not because you're weak, but because you're done being played. If this truth hits something deep, own it. Say it out loud, or write it in your notes. My energy feeds no fools. From here on out, defend your power not with noise, but with ruthless clarity. You no longer react, you calculate. You no longer justify, you observe. You no longer explain, you withdraw. Because silence is not retreat. It's not surrender. Silence is set up. It's a trap disguised as stillness. It's the weapon of those who no longer dance to anyone else's noise. Machiavelli never saw silence as weakness. He saw it as camouflage. He once said, "The wise man does not need to lie, he only needs to withhold." In a world where everyone's shouting, the man who says nothing becomes the most feared presence in the room. Because when you go silent, you disrupt the pattern. You remove yourself from their script. You become unreadable, and what people can't read, they can't control. Those who once praised your kindness, your warmth, your dependability will start to shift. They'll grow uneasy. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold now. But Machiavelli would tell you, they never praised your goodness. They praised their control over you. When you stop playing their game, their comfort ends, and that's when your real power begins. When silence enters the room, it doesn't calm people, it exposes them. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He'd say, silence doesn't confuse the strong, it terrifies the manipulative. Because silence breaks the mirror. And those who once used you to see a reflection of their comfort now see only themselves, and most can't bear what looks back. They loved you when you were predictable, when you were their echo, when you were the constant rescuer of their chaos. They loved the version of you that existed to make their world easier. But when you go silent, they lose their shield. They're forced to face the emptiness that used to be hidden behind your presence. And that's when the mask begins to crack. Those same people who once called you kind will now call you arrogant. Those who once praised your loyalty will call you selfish. Those who once leaned on your patience will accuse you of betrayal. But don't react. Don't defend yourself. Because that moment, when their illusion starts to collapse, is when your transformation truly begins. Carl Jung called it the breakdown of the persona, the false mask we wear to be accepted, to be liked, to be safe. But Machiavelli would describe it differently. He'd say, "Only when the mask falls does the game begin. Because now, you are no longer who they want you to be. You're who you choose to be, not polite, not predictable, not accessible, but powerful. You stop explaining, you stop soothing. You stop defending your peace just to keep people comfortable. Let them misunderstand your silence. Let them spiral in confusion. Let them talk. Let them dig their own psychological graves trying to decode your stillness. Because confrontation gives them a stage. Silence gives them a mirror. And the greatest exposure doesn't come from fighting, it comes from withdrawal. So here's your internal command. Do not explain. Do not chase. Do not clarify. Let the silence speak for you. Let it rattle the ones who built their confidence on your compliance. If this resonates with you, if something in your gut tightens when you hear this, it's because part of you is done performing, part of you is done living in reaction. So declare it. My silence is the end of their illusion. In a world addicted to noise, silence is rebellion. And in the game of power, silence is dominance. When you stop reacting, you don't just avoid chaos, you control it. You flip the board. You walk away from the rules they use to trap you. Because suddenly, they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you'll do next. They don't even know if you're still playing the same game. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is not always necessary to strike. Sometimes, not moving at all is the most terrifying strike of all. When you withhold your response, you create pressure. You create a vacuum that forces them to talk more, to reveal more, to panic more. And in that panic, they expose themselves. Most people have been trained to react instantly to every insult, every accusation, every emotional trap. But every instant reaction is a leash around your neck. The moment you react, they own your energy. You're no longer sovereign. You're a puppet dancing to invisible strings. But when you resist, when you say nothing, when you just watch, they collapse under the weight of their own projection. Because manipulators hate silence. They can't use it. They can't read it. They can't control it. You don't need to shout. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to win arguments, because silence is the death of their narrative. It unravels their manipulation without you lifting a finger. Carl Jung said silence connects you to your true self. Machiavelli would add silence disconnects your enemies from theirs. It turns their aggression inward. It forces them to destroy themselves in the void you left behind. This isn't weakness. It's siege warfare. Psychological dominance through stillness. They spend. You conserve. They attack. You observe. They burn out. You sharpen. Remember this rule. He who speaks first exposes first. He who reacts loses the frame. But he who holds his silence owns the moment. Let silence stretch. Let the discomfort grow. Let their own words echo back at them with no response to hide behind. Because in silence, you reveal everything while showing nothing. If that truth lands somewhere in your chest, Then write it in your mind. My silence commands. You've been conditioned to justify your quiet, to apologize for your solitude, to explain your need for peace. You've been trained to make everyone feel comfortable, even if it meant betraying your own clarity. But Machiavelli would call that a fatal mistake. He wrote, "He who justifies every step gives others the right to question it. And once people believe they have that right, they will never stop. Every time you say, 'I'm sorry I didn't reply,' or 'I was just busy,' you reinforce the illusion that you owe the world an explanation for living on your own terms. But you don't owe anyone anything. You never did. Your silence is not an offense, it's a declaration. Your boundaries are not cold, they're the architecture of your self-respect. Your detachment is not arrogance, it's the recalibration of a man who's finally done over-giving. The moment you stop explaining, you reclaim something sacred, authority over your own narrative. Because when people grow used to your explanations, they stop respecting your instincts. They start expecting your obedience, and when you stop giving it, they panic. But that panic, that discomfort, that's not your burden to carry. You are not here to soothe everyone's insecurities. You are not here to be universally liked. You are here to be clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you allow. Clear about who gets access to you. Machiavelli knew this well. He said a ruler must choose between being loved and being respected. Only one guarantees order. Too many men choose love and end up ruled by the emotions of others. They give their time, energy, and loyalty to everyone except themselves. But clarity is a sword, and silence, that's the sheath that protects it. You wield both when you stop defending your peace. So the next time someone says, "You've changed," smile. Not because they're wrong, but because they've finally noticed. You're not here to be accessible. You're not here to be explainable. You're here to evolve. And evolution doesn't come with a permission slip. Let them wonder. Let them misinterpret. Let them invent stories to explain what they can no longer access. Because every man who rises into sovereignty must first endure the guilt of no longer being available to those who only valued his obedience. If you feel that transformation happening in you, that slow burn between who you were and who you're becoming, then carve this into your mind. I owe no explanations for protecting my peace. There's a kind of pain few talk about. It's not heartbreak. It's not betrayal. It's not loss. It's the silence that follows your withdrawal. You stop replying. You stop explaining. You step out of the roles they assigned you, the rescuer, the reliable one, the emotional caretaker. At first, it feels like freedom. Then it feels like doubt. Then it hurts. The loneliness sets in. The quiet feels too quiet. You start asking yourself, did I go too far? Was I too cold? Did I just burn bridges I might need later? But Machiavelli would meet you there, in that uneasy silence, and he wouldn't comfort you. He'd clarify you. He'd say, power is not born in applause. It's born in isolation. And isolation is not punishment. It's purification. This pain you're feeling isn't loss, it's detox. You're not losing people. You're losing the version of yourself that needed their approval. You're not suffering from solitude. You're suffering from withdrawal, from the addiction of being needed, from the illusion of being indispensable. Because every time you said yes just to keep peace, you said no to yourself. Every time you showed up just to prove you're good, you stepped further away from your own strength. Machiavelli would call this what it really is, a strategic death, the kind that always precedes rebirth. Because until the obedient version of you dies, the sovereign one can't emerge. So let it hurt. Let it ache. Let it burn through everything that kept you soft when you needed to be sharp. That pain isn't weakness, it's transformation. It's the sound of your old self shattering so something greater can rise. You're not being destroyed. You're being refined. Because what's rising in that void is something far more dangerous than anything they've seen before. A man who no longer needs permission. A man who doesn't explain. A man who disappears and returns as his own force of nature. Carl Jung called this individuation, the integration of your fragmented self into something whole. But Machiavelli would call it something simpler, a transfer of power. Power that used to belong to others, now reclaimed by you. It will feel uncomfortable. It will feel unnatural. But so does every transformation that matters. The lion isn't born in a crowd. He's born alone. And when he roars, it's not to be heard. It's because he's remembered his own voice. So don't run from the pain. Stand in it. Let it carve you. Let it crown you. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion of them. And in doing so, you found yourself. If you feel that shift rising inside you, if you know this silence is the start of something irreversible, then say it quietly, with conviction. My solitude is my sanctuary. There's a difference between being seen and being remembered, between being around and being respected, between being liked and being valued. Most men confuse attention with influence, but Machiavelli understood something deeper. He wrote, "The prince who is always seen becomes ordinary. But the one who controls when and how he appears becomes unforgettable." You've been too available, too easy to reach, too eager to respond. And that constant visibility made you forgettable. It made you convenient, not powerful. Because what is always available loses its edge. What is always accessible loses its value. And what is always present fades into the background. You showed up before they even wondered where you were. You replied before they even missed you. You explained before they even questioned you. And in doing so, you trained them to treat you like a background character in your own life story. But here's the secret no one told you. Scarcity creates value. Not absence for the sake of games, but absence with intention. You don't need to disappear completely. You just need to become strategic with your presence. When you speak too often, your words lose weight. When you're everywhere, you become noise. But when you appear rarely, deliberately, your presence becomes signal. Machiavelli would call this calculated absence, not manipulation mastery, because it's not about hiding, it's about building gravity. He'd say, let them feel your absence so they remember the cost of your presence. This isn't about ego. It's about protecting an asset, your time, your energy, your focus, your emotional availability. These are currencies. They are not donations. Not everyone deserves a share. You must start treating access to you as a privilege. That means not everyone gets a reply. Not everyone gets an explanation. Not everyone earns your presence. The more they assume you'll show up, the more you must challenge that assumption. Because when they no longer know where you stand, they begin to feel your power. Think of gold. Its value doesn't come from how bright it shines, but from how rare it is, how protected it is, how difficult it is to reach. Why should your presence be any different? Why should your attention be free? A man who is always seen is soon forgotten. But the man who controls his visibility, who decides when to appear, when to speak, and when to vanish, becomes a presence they fear to waste. That's not arrogance, that's sovereignty. That's the mindset of kings, of men who live not for convenience, but for consequence. From this point forward, understand, your attention is currency. Your presence is leverage. Your absence is a reminder. So before every message you send, every meeting you attend, every conversation you entertain, ask yourself, Does this person earn my presence, or do they simply expect it? If it's the second, withdraw. If they assume your energy is free, teach them what it costs. And when you finally become selective, when you pull back from constant accessibility, something fascinating happens. People start paying attention again. They lean forward when you speak. They notice when you arrive. They remember when you're gone. Because in a world addicted to constant exposure, restraint becomes magnetic. Silence becomes signal. Distance becomes dominance. You don't need to chase attention anymore. Let your absence do the talking, because Machiavelli knew the prince who can control distance can control perception, and perception is power. Most people live in reaction. They speak too fast, post too often, reveal too much. They think visibility equals influence. But visibility without mystery is vulnerability. You want to be respected? Then make yourself scarce. You want to be remembered? Then control the moments you appear. You want to be desired? Then don't always be available. A man's value is not built through endless motion. It's built through precision, through the power to hold back. This world worships the loud and the constant, but the ones who truly rule it are the rare and the silent. Machiavelli didn't teach how to be loved. He taught how to command. He didn't glorify kindness without strategy. He glorified restraint with intention. So stop explaining your silence. Stop apologizing for your distance. Stop defending your evolution. Because the truth is this: every man who rises must first endure being misunderstood. People will say you're selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you cold. And they'll be right. You have changed. You are colder, but colder doesn't mean cruel. It means composed. It means controlled. It means clear. Because fire that burns everywhere is chaos. But fire contained, that's power. From now on, treat your presence like a storm. Rare, intentional, unforgettable. Appear with purpose. Speak with precision. Withdraw with silence. When you do, you'll notice something else. The world starts adjusting to you instead of the other way around. People who used to demand your energy now hesitate. Those who used to take you for granted now tread carefully. They'll start to wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you might do next. And that uncertainty is power. That's how Machiavelli defined control, not through force, but through mystery. Because when you are unreadable, you become untouchable. When you are unpredictable, you become unforgettable. Most men crave recognition. Few understand that invisibility is sometimes the highest form of control. Power isn't about being everywhere. It's about being everywhere in their mind, even when you're gone. When people think about you in your absence, that's influence. So make them think. Make them wonder. Make them miss the version of you that no longer exists. And when you finally choose to return, when you decide the timing and the setting, your presence will strike like thunder in a world that forgot what lightning felt like. That's the essence of a Machiavellian return. Calculated, quiet, devastating. You vanish not to disappear, but to build gravity. You retreat not to hide, but to sharpen. So if you feel that pull to step back, listen to it. Don't call it isolation. Call it preparation. Because the man who learns how to use absence as a weapon will never again need to beg for attention. Let others fight for visibility. Let them drown in noise. You rule through silence. Every move you make now is either investment or exposure. Choose investment. Choose patience. Choose scarcity. Because when you appear only when it matters, the world learns to listen. And when you speak less, every word begins to sound like prophecy. That's not ego. That's strategy. That's the art of presence. The science of power. So remember this. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be everywhere to be remembered. You don't have to be loved to be respected. Control your presence. Protect your silence. Let mystery work for you. Because as Machiavelli would say, the game doesn't belong to the honest. It belongs to the prepared. And preparation begins with withdrawal. Withdraw from overexposure. Withdraw from over-explaining. Withdraw from the constant need to prove you're good. Because a man who is no longer addicted to being understood becomes unstoppable. He doesn't react. He doesn't chase. He doesn't explain. He calculates. And when he returns, the world notices. Your next move doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be precise. Disappear to refine. Return to dominate. That's how kings move in silence. What you've just walked through isn't motivation. It's war, a silent psychological war between the obedient man you were trained to be and the sovereign man you're becoming. Machiavelli never offered peace. He offered clarity. He didn't teach comfort. He taught control. He didn't praise kindness without strength. He praised power hidden in restraint, and withdrawn the moment kindness became a leash. There's one law that rules every hierarchy of power. The man who doesn't command himself will always be commanded by others, and command begins with one decisive act: withdrawal. Withdraw from weakness. Withdraw from people who feed on your availability. Withdraw from the urge to explain yourself, defend yourself, or prove your worth. Because every time you react, you give away a piece of your sovereignty. And every time you stay silent, you reclaim it. When you stop being reactive, something subtle but powerful happens. You create distance. And in that distance, you create gravity. People start to feel your absence. They start to wonder what changed, what they did, what power you've discovered that no longer needs their approval. But you're not disappearing. You're restructuring. You're teaching the world how to treat you through silence. Machiavelli would say, when you withdraw, you don't vanish. You dominate through absence. When you stop replying instantly, they don't just miss you. They miss their power over you. When you stop explaining yourself, you don't just build boundaries, you build standards. And standards are what separate leaders from servants. Because true power doesn't announce itself. It waits. It watches. It moves when the outcome is already guaranteed. The moment you stop chasing clarity in others, you start building certainty within yourself. You stop performing. You stop apologizing. You stop explaining growth to people who want you small. Machiavelli would remind you, power is never granted. It's taken. And once taken, it's maintained not by force, but by calculation. You are not here to be accessible. You are not here to be endlessly understood. You are not here to please. You are here to command yourself, to rule your mind, your time, and your energy like a kingdom. That's the Machiavellian man. He doesn't explain. He doesn't react. He doesn't chase understanding. He speaks when it's strategic. He vanishes when it strengthens him. He returns only when the timing serves his advantage. Your new life doesn't begin with applause. It begins in silence. And it ends in command. Not command over others, but over yourself. Over your reactions, your energy, your focus. Let them gossip. Let them question. Let them miss you. You observe. You calculate. You move when it matters. Because as Machiavelli said, the game doesn't belong to the honest. It belongs to the prepared. And now, you are prepared. When you master withdrawal, you master perception. When you master silence, you master the frame. When you master absence, you master value. Because what is rare becomes powerful, and what is constant becomes ignored. When your silence is intentional, your presence becomes magnetic. When your distance is deliberate, your name becomes weight. Soon they'll realize they never knew you. They only knew the version of you that served them. So pull back, not to hide, but to refine. Not to punish, but to prepare. Not to disappear, but to ascend. Every strategist knows, retreat is not surrender. It's positioning. When you step back, you gain vision. You begin to see who panics when you stop explaining. You see who tries to fill the silence with their own noise. You see who depended on your energy to validate their existence. And when you finally see it, you stop feeling guilty for your distance. Because silence isn't cruelty, it's correction. It filters the fake. It exposes the entitled. It protects your focus. When you stop responding, they reveal themselves. When you stop explaining, they show their motives. When you stop chasing, they start reaching. That's not luck. That's psychological leverage. Machiavelli said, "Sometimes not striking is the most terrifying strike." Because silence builds pressure. It forces them to move first. And the one who moves first loses control. So let silence stretch. Let it make them uncomfortable. Because the one who can hold silence longest holds power. You owe no explanations. You owe no immediate responses. The man who justifies every step gives the world permission to question it. But the man who moves in silence commands attention without a word. You are no longer their solution. You are no longer their entertainment. You are no longer their guarantee. You are a man in command, precise, composed, deliberate. So defend your silence like a fortress. Protect it like it's sacred ground. Because silence doesn't just conserve your energy, it builds your legend. When they mention you in rooms you no longer enter, they won't talk about your words. They'll talk about your absence. They'll remember how different the air felt when you stopped showing up. They'll remember how your stillness made them question themselves. That's influence. That's control. That's power. And when they say you've changed, smile. Because change was the goal. You were never meant to stay accessible. The moment you stop being reachable, you stop being owned. You stop performing for peace. You stop explaining transformation to those still clinging to your past. You become unreadable, and the unreadable man is ungovernable. Because the less they know, the more they assume. And the more they assume, the more you control the story without ever speaking. That's the final stage of mastery when silence becomes your speech. From now on, you move differently. You speak rarely. You act precisely. You let stillness be your weapon. You let timing be your ally. You let absence become your advantage. Because power isn't about being seen, it's about being felt. So, withdraw with purpose. Detach with calculation. Return with impact. Speak only when your words can't be ignored. Move only when your actions shift the ground. And when you finally act, let it be so quiet, so exact, that it silences everything that came before it. That's the art of command. That's the Machiavellian path. That's sovereignty in motion. Your silence is your fortress. Your restraint is your weapon. Your presence when earned becomes unforgettable. Rule quietly. Withdraw wisely. Return strategically. Because in the end, power doesn't belong to the loud. It belongs to the prepared. And now you are. You no longer react. You no longer explain. You no longer chase. You calculate. You conserve. You command. And this silence you've built, it isn't your ending. It's the beginning of your reign.